In this paragraph, we're going to look at the consequences for the destination areas. We're still talking about migration. First of all, I would like to look at when do we speak of someone with a migration background or not, what the demographic consequences are of migration, if refugees are welcome in our society, what economic consequences are for migrants, what the social-cultural effects of migration are, what segregation is and what integration is, what does influence chain migration, xenophobia, and when migrants are welcome in a country. But first of all, the question is, do you have a migration background? In the past, in the Netherlands, we were talking about two things, autochthone and allochthone. And that is not allowed anymore. We're now actually looking at people who are native and people who are an immigrant. So if you talk of someone who came from abroad, you're speaking of someone with a migration background. And if you live in a country in which you weren't born, you do have a migration background. So that means that you're not native. If one or both of your parents are born in another country, you still have a migration background as well. So that means that you're not a native inhabitant of that country. And that may sound a bit difficult, but it is quite clear. It's just so if you or your parents aren't born in the Netherlands, you do have a migration background. When we are talking about demographic consequences of migration, you can have a look at the way a population changes. Because due to migration, the composition of our population changes a lot. And not only our population, the development of the country which the migrants left is of course different as well. Because most of the time migrants are young people, so that means that when they move from their home country to another, they leave their home country, and that means that there are less people with that age. So that age group that actually decreases there. Of course, they want to live in a region with enough employment and enough opportunities, welfare. So if you look at the Netherlands, what could that be? What could be the best region to live in as an immigrant? Of course, the regions with enough work. But you can ask yourself, does it really affect the population composition? Well, yes, it does. If you look at this graph on the right, it's from Germany, and you can see that there is an enormous growth in population somewhere from the start of 2011 onwards to 2015. You might wonder what that is. Well, in that period of time, there was a war going on in Syria, and Germany welcomed over 1 million people. So yes, that changes the population composition of a country. Back to ours. When you are a refugee and you want to enter the society, that's not so easy. First of all, you have to stay in an asylum center, like in Ter Apel in the Netherlands, in the north of Groningen. And when you're there, research has to be done whether you as a refugee, this person, is a refugee or like an economic migrant, because that is of course a big difference. When these people are indeed a refugee, they are allowed to stay, and in that case they'll get a residence permit, and when they receive that, they are allowed to live wherever they want. But if they are an economic migrant, they might get not that residence permit and have to get back to their home country. Of course, all these migrants do have economic consequences, and for the Netherlands, these migrants are very important because we do have an older population. That means that there are many people who can't work anymore because of old age. So we need those migrants to do the jobs that are actually the leftovers. And what kind of jobs do they get? Well, they are working in agricultural ways. They are working on the land. They are most of the time low paid or unskilled. But most of the time they do the jobs that the inhabitants of the destination country do not want to do anymore. On the other hand, there's a brain gain, and that means that we got a lot of knowledge workers and expats, and of course they are doing better paid work. And they are important as well because they drive our economy. On the other hand, you do have socio-cultural effects of migration. And because of migration, our country became a multicultural society. And that means that cultures change, and that is what we call acculturation. But with acculturation, the dominant culture actually is the one that is the most important in the country, but it could get parts of the migrant cultures as well. And if the receiving or the host country wants the immigrants to learn the natural language and their cultural characteristics, that means that there is some kind of integration going on. The new people are becoming part of the society. But it does not always happen. For example, segregation is one of the biggest problems of these times, and that happens when groups live apart from each other. For example, they live in a community with a lot of people from their home country, or they live in the poorer areas because they can't pay the expensive homes at the other side of the city. You can see this quite often in areas where migrants tend to live together, and you can see this on this picture as well. The opposite of segregation is integration, and that is the best you want to have, because cultural groups merge together, and the immigrant becomes a part of the receiving society, of the receiving country, and that means that he or she is becoming part of that society and not some person living in another country but with his head still in his home country. Earlier we talked about chain migration, and we're going to look at this again because chain migration does not always emerge. For example, when there is an economic crisis in the receiving country, people do not want to go there. When the aspiration is low, when people don't want to migrate, of course they don't go. If they don't have enough money, of course they don't go as well. On the other hand, when the first migrants do not want that their friends come over, there could be a reason for that. Most of the time, they are anxious that their jobs are being taken by them, so they keep their mouth shut. They don't tell anyone what they are doing there. Later on, when they got kids in the receiving country, of course, these children won't promote their own country because they weren't born in the mother country of their parent. So they won't tell them, you should come over here because this is a great country. No, they don't do that because they think they are, for example, just Dutch. Within the receiving country, many people don't like all those migrants, and you might know the discussions that are there every day. And it can get worse. There are people who are xenophobic, and what happens then is that someone is afraid of strangers. But you should ask yourself, should we be afraid of immigrants? Because we might need them. Unfortunately, even in the Dutch politics, you see that there are people who say that we have to stop all the migrant flows into the Netherlands. And yes, you can agree with that, but you have to watch out, because if we don't get the migrants, there are many jobs which couldn't be done anymore, and that could hurt our economy. So we have to watch out what happens. And if we are actually asking people to work over here to do the jobs that we don't want to do anymore, it could help our country with the growing of the economy. Okay, just think about that. So, when do we want the immigrants to come over? If they are skilled, if they do the jobs that the native inhabitants don't want to do anymore, when they are making money and pay tax, of course, that helps our economy. We want students to come over, and then we're talking about the battle of the brains. The more students, the better. However, last years, this seems to change a bit, because there's not enough room for all those students at the university. So nowadays they don't want to get all those students anymore, but only the best ones. Of course, there's a reason for that. If they stay over here, they get a good and high income, they pay a lot of tax, and that's good for our economy. Okay, well, I hope that you got an indication of what's happening here when we're talking about migration and how our society works with that. And of course, every country is different, but this gives an idea of how it works in the Netherlands.